Whoa, it's the illusion reporting from somewhere on spaceship Earth. I'm making a reading list right now, a virtual reading list for you. I get a lot of requests like recommended books to read, and so I made a list. I put all the links down below so you can order it. If you order it, it helps me out a little bit, dude. So if you're gonna buy a book, dude, from this list, the links are down below. And so all of these books I've read and I recommend. I will tell you that I am focused on the mid to late 1800s American history. I think that is a really potent time in our collective story, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on during that period. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on in this list, and the Civil War, dude, I think is a pretty valuable place to gather some knowledge. So from off the top of the list, it's I've got this book called Astoria by about John Jacob Astor and their attempt to start a new country out in what is presently Oregon. And so that's why the town of Astoria is named Astoria. And it's the next big expedition after Lewis and Clark. Fascinating read, fascinating part of American history we know nothing about and most people have no idea about. So that's why that one's on the top of the list, is that it's fascinating and it's well written. So, and then the next book I have is about Red Cloud, who launched one of the successful kind of battles against the cavalry. I believe he was a Sioux Indian chief in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Fascinating read again, man. As something you don't hear a lot about is that part of American history when genocide was green-lit by the United States government in its westward expansion. So Red Cloud, truly gnarly warrior. And then we have Blood and Thunder about Kit Carson. And if you're into the American West in the late 1800s, this book is a page turner. You just don't have any idea how prevalent Kit Carson is in the exploration of the West and the settlement of the West and how we all ended up on the West of the United States. It's Kit Carson is like everywhere, dude. It's amazing. So Blood and Thunder, and then Edward Curtis. The next book down is Edward Curtis. These aren't the actual book titles. It's just how I abbreviated it. It's about Edward Curtis and the Night of the Long Shadows of the Night Catcher or something. But Edward Curtis was a dude in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who went on a mission to capture photographic archival history of the original people of the West Coast of the United States in their traditional realities, as he knew that the culture of the original people was going to be diminished and eradicated. And he takes portraits of all of these people in their traditional natural settings before they are destroyed by the what is the Western way. So that one's another fascinating read. And what's cool about it is it takes place in Seattle when Seattle's forming, because Edward Curtis is like a Seattle icon, and it's pretty interesting to read about Seattle as well. So and then there's Destiny of the Republic, one of my favorites because it illuminates the life of James Garfield, one of the presidents we don't talk about. And James Garfield was assassinated by an anarchist. And Candace Millard, who writes the book, is a fantastic writer, and I highly recommend other stuff by Candace Millard, but this is the only one I put up. There's Destiny of the Republic about James Garfield. Again, unknown American history. And I think when you read about James Garfield and how he was selected to become president of the United States, again, it will open your eyes to the reality we now live in and how far off the mark we are. So I highly recommend Destiney of the Republic. It's a page turner. All these books that I historical are written in a way that's a page turner. I think the way that the people are writing historical novels nowadays are doing a service to the history and the narrative that is the story. I don't know, Anyway, and then there's Rebel Yell, which is about Stonewall Jackson. It's a big, thick book. And again, you're reading about Stonewall Jackson and what Stonewall Jackson believed about war and who all these Civil War generals are and where they all came from. They all knew each other in West Point before, and they all fought together in the Spanish-American War before they went to the Civil War. So all these generals knew each other. So that it's pretty, and Stonewall Jackson was a very interesting character, and he's worth a deep dive on. And then there's this book called The Oregon Trail, where a modern day guy goes and retraces the Oregon Trail in an actual wagon with, does he do it in ox, or I think he does it with mules, and he retraces the whole Oregon Trail in the original piece of equipment. And again, it's kind of modern past fused together, so it's a historical narrative, but it's also a real life event that occurred in modern times with this guy retracing it, and just it's fascinating. So that's the Oregon Trail. And then there's this book Trapped Under the Sea. And again, this happened in relatively recent history. It's all about them building these construction workers they have to go underneath this tunnel they're building out to this, I think it's a water discharge plant for a sewer or something, but it's out under the sea, and they got to a ship hits this thing, and I think they got to unstick this valve. And in order to do it, it's this Herculean effort of human beings overcoming obstacles and getting the job done. I kind of forget what it's really was all about, but I remember reading it and just being like, whoa, dude, this is a wild story. Again, just stuff people don't know about that occurs in our own backyard. And it happens, I believe, I want to say outside of Boston, dude, but dude, it's next level gnarly, dude. And then the one below that is Mable Stark. And it's about Mable Stark was this lion tamer woman in the, I want to say early 1900s. I read this one a while ago, but early 1900s to the, the 60s. She was a lion tamer over in the San Fernando Valley. The story of Mable Stark is she's a fascinating woman and well worth getting to know what she was doing. And then below that is Shantaram, which is a huge, thick novel. This novel was hugely influential in my spiritual understanding of what is the illusion. I read this before I became the illusion. And when you read Shantaram, it's a big, thick book about this dude over in India. And it's one of those books, man. It's if you want something to read, it's a book you can dig into, and it's fiction, so it's on the list so far. It's the first fiction book I have, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it gives you kind of a lens into Indian culture and, this dude's journey, man. And again, it's one of those things. It's all over the place, dude. So it's rad. But it's a big, thick read. And then there's this book called Trigger, and this is about a guy in Yugoslavia who retraces, I believe he retraces the path of the assassin who kills Archduke Ferdinand. And he retraces the step through Yugoslavia of the dude who assassinated Archduke Ferdinand. And again, it's this thing where he's doing it post Yugoslavian Civil War, and he's going through, and so you get this lens about this part of the world where there's just been this historical continuation of violence and war and conflict, and you get historical information about the start of World War I, which is fascinating, as well as the war in Yugoslavia. And then this dude's rolling through it as like sort of a backpacker thing. So you get it kind of, it's a sort of a 3-for-1, dude. A 3-for-1. And then I have Hellhound on His Trail. And Hellhound on His Trail is about the dude who assassinates Martin Luther King, dude. Damn, I'm having a glitch, dude. But it's about the dude who assassinates Martin Luther King, man. James Earl Ray, right? Is it James Earl Ray? And again, it's not from the standard perspective of the MLK side of it. It's all about the other side of it, about James Earl Ray and him, the assassin. And again, kind of some interesting stuff. And then I have The Last Stand. And The Last Stand is a well-done book about Custer's last stand. And if you want to read one of those sort of definitive, kind of updated, well-written narrative form in a historical context that's nonfiction about Custer's last stand, it's right up there. It's a great companion piece with Red Cloud. And again, as I dig in a lot into that sort of part of American history, because that was post-Civil War, and that's when, genocide was greenlit by the United States government to wipe out the original people that lived in the plains of the West. So, and what they did it and why they did it and who the players were. So, I think Custer's Last Stand is sort of a cliche, but when you dig into it, you find out that there's some real potent stuff, and especially what was going on and how the logistics of it all and that kind. And all these books that I'm recommending from history are not dry. I don't do dry history books. I can't handle it. And then there's this book, Pretty Birds, which is a fiction, but it's about a female assassin girl in Sarajevo during the siege of Sarajevo during the Civil War there. And I believe she's an assassin. I read this book like 15 years ago, maybe more. But I remember just digging in on this because, again, the Civil War in Yugoslavia, Bosnia, all that kind of stuff, that happened in my formative years as, in my early 20s. And I remember remember all that going on, and the youth that were there were very relatable, because you got to remember that up until that point, Yugoslavia had been pretty much a, front and center first world nation with people snowboarding and skateboarding and doing all that stuff. So when the siege of Sarajevo happens, it's brutal, dude. And again, this is a war based upon historical land occupations as well as historical religious conflict imposed with modern post-World War II accumulation of countries. And there's something in Pretty Birds if you're into that. Again, is it a dark book? It's pretty heavy, but it's well written, and you follow this journey of this girl through Sarajevo under siege. So Pretty Birds. And then I come over here, and I have one whole section for ERIK Larson, the author. I think ERIK Larson is right up there with Candace Millard as one of my favorite authors, and I pretty much put everything he wrote here because I think the way he writes is easy and interesting, and he weaves the story together without it being dry. One of the things with history, and I think that how they destroy interest in history is dryness. And there's no reason any historical story should ever be dry, dude. Life is far more interesting than that, dude. So Erik Larson, I've got In the Garden of the Beast right off the top, and that is about the ambassador to Nazi Germany at the beginning of essentially World War II, late, like the end of the 1930s to into the beginning of the 40s, I believe, dude. So that's it's worth because you get a lot of history of how it happened and what kind of happened. Because again, it wasn't just like one day the switch was flipped and these things happened that everybody throws back into World War II. This was a slow creep that happened kind of quickly, if you know what I mean. So I highly recommend In the Garden of the Beast, because a lot of that stuff about that time is either super viciously, disturbingly bloody, dude. Like you can, like, yeah, dude. Like once you read one or two of those things about how brutal it was on the civilian population of Germany, like how many more of those do you need to read? You know, you can get all up in there, but this is more about the social aspect and the political tone of an ambassador and his family during this time period as it's starting to kick off. And the next book by Erik Larson is called Thunderstruck, and I believe I'm a little phased. Like I believe Thunderstruck is the beginning of Morse code. And there's a ship with either a murderer on it who's escaping justice in the United States, and the ship is going overseas, and it's sort of the race of this killer versus the Marconi, telegraph and wireless or wired communication across the Atlantic. And as this dude's crossing the thing, that it's about the communication and how this was sort of like the first sort of kind of, I don't know how to put it, like TMZ type of deal with everybody tuning in back in the it's early 1900s, dude. So it's pretty good. Devil in the White City, dude. Fantastic book about the Chicago's World's Fair. Ask a lot of questions. A lot of questions can be asked from that, but it's about electricity, the lighting of the Chicago World's Fairs, and the fact that there also in the background was, like, I believe, a serial killer going cuckoo and that kind of thing. Well done book. And then Isaac Storm, anyone who's into weather, like hurricanes and the National Weather Service. This is about Isaac Storms, about the hurricane that devastates Galveston, Texas, and the beginning of the National Weather Service, and about how it was, just a perfect storm, literally, and the disaster and the destruction of Galveston by this hurricane. And a lot about hurricane and just communication. Again, it's a interesting part of American history, man. No one knows about, dude. And this one, and then I got one more for you. It's called Dead Wake by Erik Larson. And this is about the sinking of the Lusitania, dude, which kicks off World War I. And again, not a lot of people dig into this thing, because that's when the United States. So if Triggered goes about the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, I hope I'm getting that. It is Archduke Ferdinand. I'm just on the fly, no notes. Then this is about how America gets involved in World War I, right? And so the sinking of the Lusitania is a very interesting thing, because there's a lot of speculation that it was a passenger liner full of munitions, and it gets into the whole thing about it, and there's also, it's not only about the ship, but it's also about the U-boat crew that sunk the Lusitania as well. So it's right there. So I'm going to put more of these lists up with what I like to read. This was my First one, links down below. It helps support me, support the channel. You can definitely get fired up. And I'm going to put the link to the my actual review list. I've read all these books and made videos about them years ago. So I will put that playlist at the end right here. And the links so you can purchase, support the channel are down below. Thank you. Keep on reading, man. Fill your mind full of knowledge, not propaganda.